Welcome. This is DA Sports. I'm your host, DASASIN. Thank you. This is episode number 30. In today's episode, we just got a couple of things to get into. We're going to get into my segment on ledge, where I give you a take that most people don't have the same feeling about. And then, of course, we're going to finish the episode with my picks for NFL week number 16. All of my picks for week 16 are only going to be on the Sunday picks. We do have two games tomorrow on Saturday, but just in case there's not enough time to get this episode out before Saturday, all of the picks are going to be about Sunday's games. So let's get into it. So to start off the episode, we're going to go into On a Ledge. Now, this week's On a Ledge was brought about by the usual talk in this time of the season is about who's in the running for MVP. Now, I think most people would agree that Josh Allen is the front runner for MVP. He pretty much has a stranglehold on the trophy, and unless he falls apart in these last 3 weeks against two really weak opponents, it's pretty much already has his name on it. But the thing that there's been a discrepancy in is who belongs to be after Josh Allen in the MVP race. Now, I've heard a lot of commentary and a lot of fans talk about that they believe that this person that should be second in the MVP race is Lamar Jackson because he's putting up such great numbers. So my On a Ledge segment today is not only should Lamar Jackson not be second in the MVP race, Lamar Jackson is not even the most valuable player on his own team. Now, I know to some of you that might sound crazy based on his specific output that he's had this year, but I'm going to break it down to you in two simple ways as to why it's clearly that he is not the most valuable player on his team this season, and it's actually Derrick Henry who has been more valuable as it pertains to their success between wins and losses. Now, let me also clear this up. I'm not in any way saying that Lamar Jackson is playing bad. I'm not in any way saying that Lamar Jackson isn't a valuable member of the team. I'm also not saying that Lamar Jackson isn't one of the best quarterbacks in the league, because he is. He's one of the best players in the league, because he is. But if you look at the direct effect between Lamar Jackson's production and Derrick Henry's production, it clearly shows that Derrick Henry is the more valuable player on the team when it comes to wins and losses. So I'm going to break it down like this. To start, look at Lamar Jackson's production last year when he won the MVP, and look at Lamar Jackson's production this year. Everybody who's watched the games can objectively say that Lamar Jackson is playing better this year than he played last year. All his numbers speak to him playing better this year versus last year. I think he's already surpassed his touchdown total for the entire season from last year, and he still has 3 games left this year. So if his production is better this year than it was last year, but his team record is worse this year than it was last year, then that's a big glaring factor that their wins and losses are not determined on his production. Because obviously, if it was solely based on his production, then him playing better than last year would equate to them having a better record this year than they did last year, right? Now, some could argue, and I would honestly say I'd probably be one of those people, that because from year to year there are so many changes, you look at it like an experiment. Usually to get a true experiment, you have to isolate one variable, right? Well, from the change between one year and another, there's so many different variables, right? The player personnel is not exactly the same. Obviously, in Baltimore's case, most of their players are the same, but it's never the same exact roster, right? So from an experimental perspective, just that change in player roster could result in different variables to why they're not winning as many games. You also got to look at the teams that they're playing. Every team has also changed, so therefore the same teams that they played last year, maybe they're better this year. Their player personnel changed. Coaches have changed. The schedule has changed when they play certain teams. So the weather, everything, right? So an argument can be made from just a pure experimental purpose that you can't really compare last year's stats to this year's stats. So fine. I got a better one. The only reason I even use that example is because when I mention this subject to other people, they try to say that, oh, it can't be Derrick Henry's the most valuable because they won more games last year. And I'm like, well, but Lamar Jackson's production is better this year. So by that same token, if you're talking last year to this year, then they would have more wins this year if Lamar was the most valuable player on their team this year. But here's a better example where there's only one variable isolated. We're going to talk solely this season. The variable being isolated is their wins and their losses in comparison to Derrick Henry's carries. Now, it's important to note, as a running back, you're only affecting the game, really, when you get the ball. Obviously, there are times in a passing game where he might have to block, but in terms of actual production on the field, Derrick Henry can't really produce what he's there to produce unless they hand him the ball. Here's the important part. There's a glaring discrepancy between his carries, between their wins and their losses. In their 9 wins that they have so far this season, as of today, Derrick Henry is averaging 20 carries per game. Now, a lot of people would argue that he probably should be getting 25 carries a game, but they've had 2 games where they didn't really give him the ball as much as they should, 2 to 3 games, depending on how you look at it. But nonetheless, it still averages out to him getting 20 carries per game in their wins this season. Now, in their 5 losses, his carries per game drops to less than 15 carries per game. Now, you tell me what other top-tier running back who has rushed for 2,000 yards in a season, and at one point during this season was on pace to rush for 2,000 yards, would get less than 15 carries per game. It makes no sense, right? That's a 5 carry per game difference. That's not a blip. That's not a 1 or 2 thing like, oh, it's coincidental. No, that's a huge difference. So it directly correlates to their wins and losses being his amount of opportunity in each game. They get him the ball 20 times per game, they win. They get him the ball less than 15 times per game, they lose. Clear correlation. The team is the same, doesn't matter the opponent, wins and losses, making Derrick Henry more valuable to their success. Now, I know traditionally speaking, some would argue that, oh, well, if you're winning the game, then you're going to run the clock out, and that's why the running back will get more carries. But that doesn't apply in this scenario. Most of the games that Baltimore has lost, they were winning late, they stopped running the ball, and then they ended up losing, which speaks to it not being the other way around, like he's getting more carries because they're winning. No, his carries are leading to the win. If it were the other way around, then every single game they were losing, they'd be losing by double digits, and then it's like, oh, well, we can't run the ball anymore because we need to play catch up. That isn't how they've lost most of their games. So, again, all of the statistical factors would point to Derrick Henry's production or opportunities for production being directly correlated to their wins and losses, which proves the point that Lamar Jackson is not the most valuable player on his team this season. And that's it for this segment on a ledge. Now to finish this week's episode, we are going to get into my picks for week 16. Again, if anybody's new to the channel, every week before the NFL games, I give you 5 different picks for the games that are taking place. The first section is my pick 3, where I give you 3 different winners for 3 different games where I could see the games going either way, but I'm giving you the team that I think is going to win each game. Then the next segment is my lock of the week, which is the team that I expect to win, that I'm most confident that'll win their game regardless of circumstance. And then the last pick is my underdog pick of the week. Now, the underdog pick of the week has to be a team that's favored to lose by more than 3 points, and I'm projecting that team to have the best chance to win the game outright. So let's get into it. So to start with my pick 3. Now, the first game in my pick 3 this week, I'm going with the Cincinnati Bengals to beat the Cleveland Browns at home. Now, some might argue, could this game go back and forth? Well, it's a division rivalry game. And as we've seen with all of these AFC North battles, anything can happen. Cleveland has beaten Pittsburgh. Cleveland has beaten Baltimore. So there's no way to assume that Cincinnati is automatically going to beat Cleveland. The weather in these games is usually really cold, which kind of slows down the teams that are a little more explosive, which in this case would obviously be Cincinnati. So it definitely could go either way. The reason why I'm taking Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is favored to win this game by 9 points. They are capable of winning this game by more than 9 points, but I don't know if it's actually going to happen. I do, however, think that they're going to win the game. Main reason being is that I feel like Cleveland is really starting to stumble more in the last few weeks. Jameis Winston, I believe, has thrown at least 2 picks in each of the last 3 games. Now, he stopped throwing pick sixes, but he has thrown picks consistently. I don't think they're going to move to DTR as the starter, but I just feel like Cincinnati knows that their only chance of making the playoffs is they have to win out. And I think their next 2 games are a lot tougher than this game. So this one is definitely a must-win, and their offense has been explosive. I think that Cleveland's defensive backs are really good, but I don't care how good of a defensive back you are not shutting down these top-tier receivers solely just because of the way that these offenses are orchestrated, that even if you had a top-tier corner who had the speed, agility, awareness to know everything that's coming, they're going to find ways for this top-tier receiver to get space, to get open, whether it be from a rub route, whether it be from catching you in a zone to where that guy can't follow him. Either way. So in this case, Jamar Chase, who's running away with all the receiver totals for this season, he's going to get his catches, he's going to get his yards, even though Cleveland has a great defense. And I think Jamar Chase's explosiveness will lead Cincinnati to putting up probably 30-plus points in this game. And I haven't seen anything from Cleveland recently that would suggest that Cleveland can also put up 30 points. So I do think that Cincinnati will get the win. Now, in the next game in my pick 3, I'm going with the Atlanta Falcons to beat the New York Giants. Atlanta Falcons are favored to win by 9 points. Now, I got to be honest. For those that are new to the show, the Atlanta Falcons are my second favorite NFL football team. And every time that it seems like I pick them as a part of my pick 3, they lose. So I was really hesitant about picking them because I really want them to win this game so that they still have a chance at making the playoffs. And the reason why I think it could go either way is because they decided in this crucial moment leading into the end of the season to make a change at quarterback. Now, I'm not faulting them for making a change because Kirk Cousins has looked like dog water in the last 4 weeks. I think he's got 1 touchdown and 9 interceptions in the last 3 to 4 weeks, which is just terrible. They barely got away with the win last week. And from what all the reports have said is that they feel like that Michael Penix Jr. has been in practice performing great. And I guess there was a lot of chatter around him in practice outplaying Kirk Cousins. And considering they gave Kirk Cousins time and time and time again to try to do better on the field, they feel like, hey, we gotta make the change now while we still have an opportunity to make the playoffs. So that's the decision that they made. The reason why I think this game could go either way, even though they're playing the Giants and even though they're favored to win by 9, is because he's a rookie. And not being able to play we're now in week 16, so not being able to play against NFL competition in a live game for 15 weeks, well, 16 weeks because they also had a bye, there's a huge difference from the last time he played in a real game. Obviously, they have preseason, but preseason is way more vanilla. A lot of coaches aren't really putting in complex schemes at this point. So the last time he played a competitive game was in the national championship against Michigan, which was almost a year ago. So to go that time frame, not being in game situations, and to go from playing a college team to an NFL team who's desperate to try to get a win, who actually has a good front seven on defense that could get after the quarterback, this is a hell of a time to get your first start. So with that being said, I expect Penix to make a lot of mistakes, but I am expecting that Atlanta will find a way to get the win. I think because it's Penix's first game, the coaching staff is probably going to do a good job of really focusing on the run game. I think Bijan Robinson will probably go off. I think he'll have at least 25 touches in this game. If not for himself, he'll have 20, and Algier will have, 10 to 15. But they're definitely going to run the ball a lot. I think they're going to give him easy progressions, a lot of play action, things of that nature. Things that try to make the decisions a lot easier for him to process. And I think that overall, Atlanta has enough to get the win, and I think Atlanta's defense has enough to make sure that the Giants can't put up a bunch of points to where it makes more pressure on Penix to score. And that's why I'm picking Atlanta to get this win. The last game in my pick 3, I'm going with the Minnesota Vikings to win on the road against the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Minnesota is favored to win by 3. This game is on the road in Seattle, so that typically is a tough environment. Recently, as we saw when Green Bay went to play in Seattle, it wasn't the Seattle home field advantage that we used to know all the time. We even heard Green Bay's fans clearly chanting "Go Pack Go," which never happened before. So I expect for Minnesota, even though Minnesota's fan base is not as big as Green Bay's, I feel like Minnesota's fans will be able to travel similarly to the way that the Packers did and make it loud enough to where it's not so much of a home field advantage for Seattle. I know Geno has been playing better his last couple of games, but I think that Brian Flores' defensive scheme is primed to make Geno make mistakes, and I think Minnesota's going to be able to capitalize off of that. I also think that Sam Darnold has been playing really well. Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson has also been explosive week after week, and I think that will continue. So even though this game is probably going to be really close, which is why the spread's only 3, I do think that Minnesota will be able to pull off the win. Now for the next pick is my lock of the week. This week's lock of the week is the Detroit Lions to beat the Chicago Bears on the road. Detroit is only favored to win this game by 6.5. The interesting part is that it opened at 7.5 and then came down to 6.5. Now, this is a division rivalry game, so of course anything can happen. Detroit is dealing with a ton of injuries, which is a product of why they lost their last game. But I feel like the combination of them losing last game, and it being a division rival where they realize that Minnesota is right on their heels, that'll leave them motivated to kind of get things back together. I expect them to come out super explosive, big plays, trick plays, and Chicago has really been reeling. You can see Caleb Williams' body language game after game where he just looks defeated on the sideline. I think this will be more of the same. I think Detroit will try to make an early impression, get out to a huge late lead, and put pressure on Chicago to try to score. It'll kind of change their whole momentum, and I think that Detroit is just going to dominate them. The spread's only 6.5. I actually expect Detroit to win this game by double digits and to win comfortably. So that is my pick for lock of the week. Now the last pick is my underdog pick of the week. Now this week's underdog pick of the week, just like most weeks, unfortunately, I am not really confident with any of the options that I had. So the pick that I ended up landing on that I'm going with this week is the Tennessee Titans. I'm picking them to beat the Indianapolis Colts on the road in Indy. Now Tennessee is projected to, the spread right now is 3.5. So they are expected to lose by more than 3 points. Even though it's just barely 3 points, it's still more than 3 points. So it qualifies for me to use as my underdog pick of the week. My only hope that the reason why I'm picking Tennessee to pull off this upset is because it looks like Tennessee has come to the conclusion that they can't play Will Levis anymore. So as long as Will Levis doesn't see the field, then they have a shot, and that's why I'm taking them to win this game. I think that Tennessee's defense is explosive enough to cause Anthony Richardson to make a mistake, whether it be him fumbling on a run play or him trying to force the ball in a tight window and throwing an interception. One way or the other, I think that Tennessee will create at least 1 to 2 turnovers in this game that they'll be able to capitalize. I think that Mason Rudolph will really value this opportunity, realizing that, hey, even if it's not to be Tennessee starter next year, him putting good, film together will give him an opportunity to either stay there as a backup or maybe potentially get a starting role somewhere else for next season. Either way, that's what they're playing for, and I expect that Tennessee will be able to get the job done. I think that they'll be able to even be effective in the run game too, and the Colts' home field advantage is not really significant to me, so I think that Tennessee has the best shot at pulling off the upset. Would I be surprised if they lose? No, but out of all of the teams that are favored to lose by more than 3 points, I definitely feel like they have the best shot to win. So that's what I'm going with my underdog pick of the week. So that wraps up this week's episode. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Please make sure you like and subscribe and share wherever possible. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Peace.